Some say war is the language of humanity. Others call it the herald of the end. But one truth remains. War is destruction. War is despair. Cities burn, families break. History forgets the names of the fallen, but remembers those who are victorious. At the birth of civilization was Gorgo, queen of Sparta. Trained for conquest, but that was never her true goal. She sought something greater, to unite the world under a common diplomatic law, to let independent nations thrive side by side. As history tells, her advisors laughed at her. They called her naive, and soon she understood. In this world, bloody conflict isn't a choice. It's a constant. Perhaps peace cannot be negotiated. Perhaps it must be taken by force. The story of the ancient Greek Empire starts on the northwest coast of the Pannonia continent, with the looming shadow of Methana volcano threatening the first settlers of Greece, as well as the prospect of growth cultivating spices. Gorgo decides to travel southwest along the coast to found the capital city of Sparta. Exploration is the Greek people's first agenda, and staring over the horizon of Lake Retba, they wonder what secrets, wonders, and tragedies they might encounter beyond. Records show that Gorgo's first advisor Magnus sought rapid expansion and growth, directing Gorgo's decisions towards settling more cities as soon as possible. However, as we know, this was quickly met with resistance, as on the other side of Lake Retba, not only was there the independent city-state of Mitla, but also another civilization, one that challenged control over the continent's territory, Portugal. As decades passed, tensions between both ancient civilizations kept rising, and Portuguese cities were rapidly painting the continent. Gorgo did not falter. As she prepared for war, she also embraced the aid of Himiko, a wise general and diplomat, perhaps even a source of inspiration for Gorgo herself. With Himiko's help, Mitla became Greece's vassal, and the inevitable war came soon after. Although Gorgo sought diplomacy, she was blessed by Ares. It took many years for her to get her bearings, as Portugal attacked from every direction. But with the help of her new war advisor Victor, she learned that Portugal was focusing their efforts on maritime technology, investing in never-before-seen caravels, and she took advantage of that. In a strong offensive by land, Greek hoplites made easy work of Portuguese defenses before they even had the opportunity to perfect their ships, or their walls for that matter. According to specialists, Greek forces were so brutally ruthless and terrifying, they demoralized Portuguese warriors and easily conquered city by city until reaching the capital. Portuguese scripts even indicate that some Greek warriors drank the blood of the fallen in a crude display of cannibalistic oppression. Such was the heir of Ares, the Queen of Sparta. This was the devastating war that cemented her into history long before religion even existed. An era of mythology and expansion. No Portuguese was safe from this Greek massacre, but it was not her last. For Portugal resisted. Their new capital, Porto, was well defended in an almost impassable valley, and so, marking the end of the classical era, a peaceful agreement was made. Throughout the long war, Greece encountered other civilizations, more distant than Portugal, and therefore less threatening: Rome and Vietnam. New independent powers were also revealed, paving way to more vassalage and diplomacy. With this newfound peace, Gorgo was finally free to pursue her diplomatic goals. A new era of growth, science and culture was upon her people. A golden age for Greece, brought upon by the past and setting the path towards the future. An era of new religions, new encounters, and free inquiry. A strange, peaceful time, when the World Congress was founded and made its first impact on the world. Congress records indicate that Gorgo, although excited to begin negotiations, was inexperienced at first, but relished the peace and diplomacy. But this peace did not last long, for along with the World Congress came the world's first military emergency. An act of fear for Greek destruction. Gorgo's search for war in the past soon led war to find her once again. After all, it was her very nature, her very essence, and not even she could escape from that. The ones who suffered the most from this were the Portuguese. They pleaded for help from their friends in Rome and Vietnam, but none of them could match the military might of Gorgo. Greece had developed new tactics and new technologies. Meanwhile, they continued growing, building libraries, founding new cities. Neither Portugal, Rome, nor Vietnam could touch them. But they could conquer her vassals. The thought of losing vassals is said to have destabilized Gorgo mentally, leading her to embrace even more her violent nature. As Greece prospered, the final blow to Portugal was made. The first ever recorded complete devastation of a nation. There was no longer Portuguese culture. There was only Greece. Greece was prosperous and maintained control over independent city-states, but was falling behind scientifically and culturally compared to other nations. Consequences of stalemate during war. With this, Gorgo planned an assault on Roman soil, expecting to use the same tactics that worked on Portugal. Perhaps her new neighbor, Gitarja, Queen of Indonesia, could be of use for this. As trade agreements were defined and long-lasting friendships were forming, on the front lines of conflict, no progress was being made. The Renaissance era began with advancement in other nations, but not for the Greek people. Gorgo knew a drastic change was necessary and ordered the founding of a secret city in the far north, surrounded by snow, dedicated to scientific study and gunpowder production. This was the city of Knossos, known today as the research center of the world. Greece's vassal, Granada, continued resisting while Greek troops remained in stalemate, unable to obtain new weapons and equipment in order to advance or help defend the city on the other side of the sea. As Gorgo invested in piracy through her connections to the merchant Sinbad in an attempt to destabilize Roman and Vietnamese naval forces, she also continued her efforts in dominating the World Congress. Although her advisors recommended against it, she voted in favor of Rome, her own military adversary, in an effort to obtain diplomatic leverage in the future. Her wise strategy paid off, demonstrating far more advanced knowledge in diplomacy compared to previous voting sessions. But during this triumph in international affairs, Granada surrendered to Vietnam, and Sinbad was captured and executed by Rome. Gorgo's fears of losing vassals had started becoming a reality, and this broke her. Known as the Broken Crown era in Greek history, writings indicate that in the following decades, Gorgo went mad with hate and fully embraced Ares himself, going far beyond liberating her vassal by ruthlessly conquering every city she could. Gorgo forgot about diplomacy For at this moment in history, she had a new objective: destroy Vietnam. The Greek Broken Crown era began with first contact with Australia and Macedonia, as well as an unexpected declaration of war between Rome and Vietnam, previous allies. Meanwhile, the first Acropolis was built by the Greek people, with hopes to encounter entertainment in art. The diplomatic mistake of conquering a struggling independent nation took a heavy toll on Batrio of Vietnam. Julius Caesar, no longer at war with Greece, focused his military power towards their previous friend in an act of betrayal. Although still not trusting each other, the once mightiest adversary of Gorgo would now become her military supporter. With Apadana in the capital of Sparta, Gorgo maintained control of her other vassals, while launching a large-scale advance on Granada, sending her troops on a long odyssey across the sea. Morale was high, as the construction of the wonderful statue of Ares was finished next to the military encampment of Lisbon, already located next to the Temple of Ares. The liberation of Granada soon began as endless reinforcements embarked from Greek lands. Meanwhile, as Indonesia expanded in the direction of Greece, a public international friendship and military alliance was declared between Getarsia and Gorgo. As Indonesia joined the war against Vietnam, the Vietnamese people trembled and denounced their own leader for her actions, for they knew what was to come. Batrio was too focused on defending Granada to notice Roman ships arriving at Saigon. A pincer strategy, proposed by Gorgo's advisor Victor, was about to begin, conquering from both east and west of the Vietnamese territory and making their way towards the heart of the nation. Rome and Greece had a common enemy, but they were not allies. Gorgo was clever, and she knew she would lose troops if she had them attack Granada immediately. So she waited. She waited for Roman troops to weaken the city, only to swiftly take Granada for herself at the end. Gorgo acquired her vassal once again. Vietnam was undefended and weak. Gorgo laughed at them. For Greece, she was the daughter of Ares. For her vassals, she was a savior. For the rest of the world, she was a mad warlord. One who still followed her ancient cannibalistic traditions, while forcefully imposing her own authoritarian views. History repeats itself, and for Gorgo, conquering Vietnam was a very long walk in a very large park. But maintaining loyalty on the newly acquired Vietnamese cities was a challenge for Gorgo, one that she relied on her advisors to solve as governors of the new land. At this point, the Greek Empire was officially divided between Eastern Greece and Western Greece, separated in territory but unified in a common goal. Along with this, the Second Greco-Roman War started. As Gorgo conquered Vietnam and defended against Rome, she encountered another civilization that would become another long-lasting ally, Gilgamesh of Sumeria. Known for his friendly personality, Gilgamesh quickly formed a research alliance with Gorgo as she conquered Vietnam's capital. With the capital taken, the Vietnamese people were losing hope. Gorgo easily unified the people of Western Greece, while Eastern Greece continued prospering as the most culturally influential region of the world. Culture that was, of course, assimilated from other nations through war. Gorgo continued conquering Vietnamese land when Greece completed the historical mark of circumnavigation, the first nation to ever do so. Some even say that, knowing how large the earth truly was, Gorgo felt humbled. This geographic feat marked a turning point in Greece's development. Gorgo decided to set her focus inwards and recovered her previous desire for diplomacy above all else. Vietnam was no longer a contender for the World Congress, but Rome was a constant looming shadow on her doorstep. She continued ordering the construction of wonders, vassalizing city-states, and in doing so discovered that Julius Caesar was destroying Bologna, an independent nation which she saw as a diplomatic opportunity. Roman scriptures indicate that Gorgo attempted to break through Roman defenses to the south of Granada, but Julius Caesar was also a masterful war tactician and developed new defensive technologies. Gorgo had seen this all before and knew what must be done. Knossos was already providing Greece with new military sciences and technology, but in order to remove Rome from its pedestal, they needed to go one step further. Gorgo knew that Rome was well defended by land, and so she needed to control the seas and the skies. By this point, Gorgo was no longer called the Broken Crown, and she was proving to be a strong emerging diplomatic contender. But other nations continued calling Greece the Kingdom of the Mad Queen. Throughout the era, Eastern Greece continued expanding while also intervening in the Roman-Bologna War. During this period, the first Greek armadas and armies were formed in preparation to take Rome and unify Western and Eastern Greece. Gorgo understood that industrial development would be necessary for upcoming conflicts, and the mausoleum of Halicarnassus in the city of Porto would facilitate the future construction of aerodromes and airplanes on the borders of Rome. On the other hand, Potala Palace, a wonder that Gorgo was building, was ruined and destroyed, delaying diplomatic relations in Greece. Historians still wonder if the Potala Palace ruins were a consequence of natural disaster, diplomatic sabotage, or poor management by Pingala, one of Eastern Greece's governors, and the one responsible for this grand construction. With the discovery of oil, Greece set their eyes on new lands, abundant in the black gold. Although it would take long to discover methods for drilling underwater, settling on these oil reserves was a wise long-term strategy for Greece. Soon after, as Sparta finished the construction of the Casa de Contratación, Greece learned of another resource which would aid them in more ways than one: coal. The newly built wonder would help in diplomacy, and the newly discovered resources would accelerate production and military technology immensely. Greece was finally upon a true industrial revolution. Rather late compared to other nations, but much more potent. Everyone knew that the stalemate on Roman borders would soon come to an end. Greek battleships now stood between both adversaries' mainlands, and soon, Greek planes would fly above them. What we now call the modern era started with Gorgo publicly declaring her government a fascist state. No longer abiding by the title of queen, she would now be known as the Iron Chancellor, and continue to forge her diplomacy in violence rather than peace. Industry and science were central to Greece's development, but espionage and historical works of art also defined this era. While Greece invested in military advancement, their cultural influence over the world increased as well. However, as both Western and Eastern Greece finished constructing their first aerodromes close to Roman borders, Gorgo realized this stalemate was utilizing too much of her resources. Negotiations between allied countries resulted in a temporary truce with Rome. A ceasefire where both leaders would dedicate themselves to developing and growing their respective nation. A moment dedicated to international relations. Greece was glorious, inviting even. The war against Vietnam seemed eternal, but the city of Quang Tri rebelled on its own, unsatisfied with the leadership of Batrio and influenced by Greek nationalism. Meanwhile, Pingala received the highest honor a Greek governor could achieve: Despite failing to construct Potala Palace, he continually proved to Gorgo that he was more than capable of pushing cities to new limits. As Gorgo said herself, Pingala turns cities into beacons. Their light is science, their strength is culture, and their reach is eternal. It was unveiled decades later that Magnus and Victor, veterans who had served her long before Pingala, nursed a quiet resentment. Yet their respect for the Iron Chancellor, or perhaps even a deep-seated fear of her ruthless resolve, kept any thoughts of rebellion firmly in check. It was clear that Pingala was heavily influencing Gorgo's actions, as she focused on culture and tourism, even going so far as to end the seemingly endless war with Vietnam, a disruption of the barbaric image she cast in earlier ages. It seemed as though she had finally changed her ways. She was no longer the Mad Queen or the Broken Crown. She was truly a diplomat and a leader. At least, that is what it seemed for the other members of World Congress. Away from public sight, Gorgo and her advisors organized their military, expecting the war on Rome to continue once again. Unbeknownst to the rest of the world, Greece had access to uranium, the deadliest poison known to humanity, the fire of the atom, the metal that controls empires. But Julius Caesar was not naive. He knew that Gorgo plotted against him. She needed to act with intelligence and continued growing her nation alongside his. The remote settlements of Corinth and Olympia were founded, dedicated to offshore oil extraction. On the western borders of Rome, the independent city of Quang-Tri was finally aggregated into Greek land, another strategic location from which to attack Rome in the future. The Cold War between the most advanced powers of the world was unfolding. After centuries of war and destruction, both nations were forcing the other to relentlessly develop new technologies and civics. A silent battle spread throughout the entire continent of Phoenicia. International negotiations, trade agreements, diplomatic decisions, they were all just adding fuel to the fire that would eventually explode. Gorgo continued restructuring her military as a display of power and intimidation, while a time of unprecedented prosperity flooded Greek lands. Pingala finished overlooking the construction of the Statue of Liberty, a symbol of celebration over the time Greece liberated Grenada from Vietnamese rule, and a landmark of great influence within the World Congress. The Greek people were ecstatic, and the world was slowly forgetting the atrocities Gorgo committed in the past. Until one fateful night, when a Greek spy revealed to Gorgo that Rome was investing in rocketry. She had yet to control the skies over Rome, and she could not let Caesar pierce the heavens before her. The madness inside had never truly left her. The duality of her existence raged in her mind as she desperately struggled to maintain composure and focus on diplomatic affairs. She knew that Greece was the most influential and prosperous country in the world. Greek music was infecting every nation. Greek museums were filled with breathtaking artworks, and natural parks and world wonders painted a beautiful image over the Greek horizon. Why then was she not satisfied? Greece was still divided. Rome was still a thorn in her history. Julius Caesar kept taunting her. It had been far too long since Ares whispered in her ears. Her own personal notes, encountered many years later, describe a fiery wrath in search of conquest, conflicting with a strong desire to globalize and control the Congress. Ultimately, a reckless act from Australia incentivized her decision. Gorgo had given no attention to Australia ever since the creation of the World Congress. But now, they had declared war on her allies, Indonesia and Sumeria. And so, as Greek globalization rocketed Greece ahead of Rome in scientific development, the Iron Chancellor took action. As war between Australia and Greece's allies ran its course, Gorgo worried about Caesar's progress in rocketry, as they had already begun constructing a space shuttle that would take the first humans to the moon. Once again, her blood boiled beneath her calm demeanor, declaring another great war on Rome in the guise of a protectorate action in favor of the city-state Bologna. But her true intentions were clear: the complete destruction of her historical enemy and the unification of Greek territory. It is said that Gorgo reignited her ancient Greek cannibalistic traditions. There is no historical or public evidence to support such a claim, and it was most likely a rumor spread by adversaries in order to decrease her popularity. To Gorgo, this was not merely the conquest of Rome. It was the removal of the last fracture in the Greek world, the forging of a state that was whole, efficient, beautiful, and unstoppable. But she did not waver in her pursuit of global diplomatic dominance. On the contrary, Gorgo exploited the chaos of the New World War to secure the chairmanship of the World Congress. Meanwhile, a rapidly expanding Greek social media sphere was reshaping communication across the globe. Like a seasoned strategist, she harnessed this technology to project nationalism and culture far beyond her borders, reshaping her image and bending public opinion to her will. Caesar soon recognized a grave miscalculation. His ambition to lead humanity into space had seemed a noble pursuit, but Greece's relentless military machine was already eclipsing his every advance. Greek missile cruisers and battleships stood by Roman borders, waiting for the precise moment to strike in full force. Amid the tension, Greece unveiled a new political order, corporate libertarianism, and with it, Gorgo seized not only global diplomacy, but the world's economy itself. Airports allowed for rapid deployment near front lines of battle, and Greece continued funding great writers, artists, and musicians to influence the world. Finally, after centuries of stalemate with Rome, Gorgo launched her first aerial attack on Roman cities using jet fighters, technology that no other country in the world possessed. It did not take long for Greek forces to begin their land assault within Roman districts. In order to focus her efforts on Rome, Gorgo declared peace with Australia, abandoning her own allies in the Great World War. After all, she did not care about the others, only Rome. Lugdunum was the first to fall. Thousands of Romans killed in the process. Caesar begged for peace, but the Iron Chancellor had no intention of offering mercy. The world was torn between those who supported Greek rule and those who denounced it. Gorgo did not care. She set out for the Roman capital, with technology far too advanced to contend with. The Roman capital fell, and the entirety of Rome fell into disarray and chaos from then on. A systematic and precise domination. Left without hope and in fear of the sudden creation of giant nuclear death robots, the surrounding cities soon surrendered as well. Mediolanum was the final piece to unify western and eastern Greece, and with its surrender, the war advisor Victor finally earned his highest honor in the eyes of Gorgo. At last, as Greece's first giant death robot made its way to Roman territory, Greece was whole. The people praised Gorgo as a goddess herself. No longer was Ares the god of war. They now only spoke of the Iron Chancellor. However, Caesar was not the only one racing to reach space. Gorgo's ally, Gilgamesh, had caught up to Roman technology as Greece conquered the continent. With this in mind, Knossos finished the construction of Amundsen Scott Research Center, finally cementing them as the global scientific and technological pole. As Caesar begged for peace to no avail, the world began succumbing to the wrath of nature. Industrial advancements, led by Greece, were causing sea levels to rise. Gorgo knew her diplomatic reputation would be tarnished if she allowed the world to view her as the bringer of global warming. And as she continued destroying Rome with giant nuclear mechs, her vassals requested a hearing. They demanded that she reduced Greece's carbon production in benefit of the entire world. Thus, the climate accords were established. Gorgo understood this as an opportunity. Conquering territory has always been glorious, but controlling every decision made by every nation would truly make her the ruler of the world. Domination of the World Congress was in her grasp. She simply needed to convince everyone that she was the only one capable of saving the world. She immediately demanded that all coal, oil, and nuclear power plants were exchanged for wind and solar power plants throughout her entire nation. Many cities focused on public carbon recapture and reforestation projects. A countrywide effort towards reversing the effects of global warming was underway, diverting international attention towards environmentalism, while Rome was entirely wiped from the globe. The second civilization to fall under Gorgo's devastation. Afraid of the influence Greece had over the Congress, Alexander of Macedonia attempted to pressure Gorgo into releasing some of her vassals. A foolish mistake from a leader with no experience in war. Alexander learned in the same way as Batrio that Gorgo was unforgiving. The Macedonian people would soon understand the feeling of true terror as they observed giant Greek robots so massive that they towered over ships while walking on the sea floor. Macedonian cities stood no chance. Their technology seemed archaic compared to Greece's. The mere military pressure exerted by Greece was enough to solicit the surrender of the Vietnamese city Da Nang into Greek lands. And the final city of Dong Hoi soon fell under bombardments and occupation, marking the third civilization to be completely destroyed and assimilated by Greece. Gorgo had finally conquered and united the entire continent of Pinocchio. Meanwhile, the devastation of Macedonia continued. Gorgo wanted to send a message. She wanted to show the entire world what would happen when you try to take her vassals. The world became her playground, and she continued mercilessly conquering Alexander's cities, including the Macedonian capital Pella, while still promoting progress towards the climate accords. Gorgo's conquest seemed unstoppable, until she discovered that every city taken, every relic seized, only magnified Greece's cultural renown. Fearing her empire might be remembered for art instead of power, she issued a brutal decree. The burning of books, the destruction of paintings, the erasure of relics. What could have been a golden age of knowledge became a calculated purge. In her quest for control, Greece turned its fire upon its own heritage. Portuguese, Roman, Vietnamese, and Macedonian scriptures and art were brutally destroyed, burned in public square. Gorgo chose to erase culture rather than to allow it to outshine her rule. With this, the world understood her message. No one would come in the way of her and diplomatic monopoly. Conquest was no longer about territory or glory, it was about silence. By erasing culture and halting the Macedonian campaign, she proved that domination could come not only through war, but through the obliteration of memory itself. Nations bowed, not out of admiration, but out of fear that their very history could be extinguished. But Gorgo was not finished. She believed a final message was necessary, one that would forever cement her rule as Iron Chancellor of the world. Even allies had to learn that loyalty was not a choice, but a mandate. Indonesia, led by Getarsia, Greece's earliest supporter since the fall of Portugal, was chosen for this demonstration. When Getarsia dared renounce the alliance and vote against Greek domination in the World Congress, Gorgo answered with the most heinous act of her reign. What followed was not diplomacy, nor war, but annihilation. With this act, she ended the climate accords and declared herself the sole leader of the World Congress.
Hear ye and rejoice. I am your Savior, and I can be your death. Love me, fear me, worship me. I am Gorgo, the destroyer of nations and the maker of world peace. I bring to you a new world order. Follow my guidance, obey my decisions, and together we shall prosper beyond the heavens themselves.
History is often forgotten or rewritten, but we must not fall for illusions. Today, when you think of Greece, you may picture diplomacy, culture, science, and progress, yet Greek history is stained with blood. From the days when Sparta was just a city in the northeast coast of Pannotia, under Queen Gorgo, war was all they ever knew. Her search for diplomacy was always shadowed by conquest. Blood rituals, public executions. These made the Greeks the terror of the world. And when the Mad Queen declared you her enemy, crimes against humanity followed. History must not forget the millions that were killed by Gorgo's actions. This is the true history of Greece. This is the true history of Gorgo.